Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report, and in this episode we are looking at future risks and their implications for India, its economy, its industry and its people. An interesting uplifting piece of news that has just come in is that the Indian economy has grown at 8.2% in the April-June quarter of this year. But at the same time, a piece of news which came in late last year was that in the last financial year, India had lost close to 742 billion or 8.6% of its GDP to violence and incidents of attacks and unruliness that mark sometimes agitations which go out of hand. So there is the positive side about the Indian economy, but there is also the threats that continue to dominate the narrative for anybody wanting to do business and have an industrialized impact on Indian society. And we have two experts who are very well placed to look at the issues related with the risks to India and its industry and its economy. We have with us Mr. Gary Singh, President of INDIRISK Consulting, and Gary is very well known in the business circuit and in the industrial world for his expertise on risk and risk analysis. And we have once again with us, sir, Dr. Vikram Singh, eminent academic, a very distinguished police officer from Uttar Pradesh. So a man who looks at not just his experience in the police, but more importantly, analyzes the data that comes across with some intent to try and find a way forward. And to that extent, sir, I would like to ask my first question from you, that this incidence of violence that seems to be impacting so heavily on our economy and the challenges that it presents to the story of India, is there no way for making sure that situations don't spiral out of hand? Because very often we find the moment a situation goes out of hand, my own belief is that the police and intelligence agencies have either failed to assess a situation or they have failed to come up with a suitable response to a situation when it's gone spilled over. What's your takes?
I'm happy that you've raised this very important question, Mr. Maruf Raza. The first and the foremost, we have a success story, and a great one at that. But the game spoiler is something like mob lynching, the increase in crime against women, increase in cyber crime and the like. Yes, the intelligence agencies should have been able to at least identify the problem, and the police force have it in them to address the issue. But there is some reluctance on the part of the police to be proactive in certain crime. I don't say cyber crime, I would say perhaps they need an upgradation of skills. But when it comes to crime against women, when it comes to things like mob lynching, I would say why the hesitation, why the differing? They should have gone the extra mile to ensure that these crimes were not only nipped in the bud, but crushed in the bud. That does not seem to be clear. Until the time we give a no-nonsense signal that nobody would be spared, I think we have a long way to go.
But what are the first steps to be taken, sir?
The first step is that there should be political message that you subscribe only to the rule of law, don't get carried away by local messages and local verbal instructions. The rule of law is very clear that there will not be mob lynchings. And if there at all is a mob lynching, come down like a ton of bricks on all the accused and ensure that there is no repetition of such crime. Invoke the provisions of the gangsters, the Macoka and the National Security Act. I doubt if these three provisions have been invoked anywhere in the country. And that I would like to have my note of dissent to the police leadership. Why have you not invoked? If you do not invoke these provisions, then what are you waiting for?
Perhaps there is a message in not taking action at all. Is also a political message that goes out to those who are resorting to acts which are certainly not part of a civilized society. But Gary, smart cities in India, there have been about 3,000 smart city projects or even more, but they are making a lot of media headlines. But in reality, is there any steps or set of steps that we can really look back and say that this is standard set of steps across all the smart city projects to ensure that the project itself doesn't get derailed as and when it becomes its own enemy by becoming too good or too successful?
Well, thanks for the question, but maybe I will take a few seconds to comment. I think smart city has become an unnecessary buzzword in the country. Does this mean once these smart cities will come up, only then we'll be living in a habitable state? Or people will live there and some of us who don't want to shift there will continue to live in unsmart cities? So it's a very unnecessary buzzword. But yes, if you're looking from the infrastructure point of view, looking from the investment for the infrastructure point of view, it is great. It is great if these infrastructure projects come up and produce an economic boost. In a certain limited manner they are doing as well. But imagine the impact, because we have not secured funding for all these projects adequately. Imagine the impact when these projects start failing. These projects do not provide the success we were looking for, because it's the same set of people which has destroyed our present city and habitat are now trying to manage new set of city to be made. Is it becoming a game to eat money, or is it a genuine something nice coming up? What has changed in smart city? So we are actually on a risky ground here. We're not really looking at brighter future, which is being so projected. We are on a riskier ground in case we are looking at only the smart city to be solution for Indian habitat.
Okay, so well, that's very well put actually, because until smart cities come in, it doesn't mean nothing else was happening in India. But take it further. So there are cities and cities in India, and some of our cities, we pride them for being pretty much up to speed to world standards, at least in terms of the air communication links, at least in terms of the hotel industry, the services that is provided. Also in terms of some of the other facilities that we can provide in terms of business environment for people to fly in and do business and fly out. How can we protect these centers of growth from the spillover effect of the chaos and confusion that is often the case in the periphery?
You're so very right, and a very poignant question at that. I would say that the malignancy and the negativity of other so-called sectors that are almost on the verge of collapse. Take, for example, the telecom sector. Take, for example, the banking sector. They used to be so wonderful at one point of time, and today are on the verge of almost a collapse. But yes, the oasis of excellence that we have is to insulate them, to ensure that they have everything that they need, for, like security for one, adequate manpower, trained manpower, due protection of the state and the police, and if they are threatened by local politicians on frivolous grounds of agitation, they should be protected without questioning, without batting an eyelid. The ground reality is that time and again, an orchestrated agitation has the better of these, I would say, the air security, air travel, the hotel industry and the like. Because who will target these icons of excellence? Only those vested interests who would like them, drag them down to their level of incompetence.
Gary, I mean, it's often been said that Indians are like a bunch of crabs. You put us in a basket and we'll get the other crab in also. But in a more specific sense, there is an area which has been in the news. There has been in the news, and that is, the whole, this revival of the MeToo movement. Now, we can go on and on about it, but briefly, how would it impact on the sense of security that women need to feel at the workplace? Because just MeToo has not spelled out what follow-up steps need to be taken to make women feel secure.
Sure, I think that's very critical, because women constitute a large skill force which India has not well utilized till now. And with whatever the MeToo movement, or there have been a lot of other issues which have happened, this can actually deny India a large skill set, a very intelligent and balanced skill set still not available for much longer time. But as of now, if you're looking at steps, there is a mixed responsibility which lies here, because there are too many people who are trying to put fingers in all the directions, but nobody is saying, I will also do something about it. So this is not something which you can just push it to the government or to the corporate. There has to be a mixture. Thankfully, the laws exist, so don't worry about creating another law. I think there's a mixed responsibility from the corporate leadership. Yes, a fast actions from law enforcement and judiciary to be followed if something like this is reported. But I have one request as well, that MeToo should not wait for 10 years. Well, so it's a mixture. It's everybody's responsibility to do.
Yeah, it's a very important point you've raised, Gary, but we'll be back after a break to look at issues related with cyber threats, security, as well as industrial security, and most importantly, there are lots of still unsettled movements across the countries like NAXALISM and insurgencies that need to be addressed, and that we'll do after the break. Welcome back. We are looking at the risks to India and its economy, its people, and to its businesses, and the implications of that if not attended to adequately. Dr. Singh, sir, another question which I'm sure you are very well placed to answer us is about industrial safety and security. Now, it's an area which you have hands-on experience in dealing with it, but there have been incidents linked to the safety of the workers, and I'm not just talking of women workers. I'm talking overall of safety of workers. And this is an area that I find that I was reading some time ago that one of the areas where India has not been able to maximize its manufacturing capabilities is because of the decadent or the old labor laws and various other industrial laws which make it absolutely impossible for anybody to be progressive and to come up with something new to address the modern India's demands.
So true, sir. A thing of quality can be manufactured anyway, but that is a theoretical part. But when you are about to start an industry, you'd rather, apart from a few states, which wouldn't be more than 6 or 7, it is very difficult even to open shop and start a business. Whatever the claims may be, the fact remains that the moment a person or an entrepreneur decides to start an industry or a manufacturing unit primarily, or any other trade or commerce industry, everybody, I mean the labor laws are so decadent and so overpowering. The pollution laws, the anti-pollution laws, you have a creature by the name of Dhua inspector, he will see to it that he comes every 15 days and inspect the smoke and the effluents being emitted. Then there are any number of labor inspectors, the EPF inspectors, there are no fewer than 18 inspectors who will inspect your sites if you have a workforce of more than 10. And that is the biggest deterrent. There is no harm in being inspected, but the purpose of the inspection is different from ensuring the faithful implementation of rule of law. I hope you get what I'm hinting at, Mr.
Yes, absolutely.
Then in that case, I think you are doing more harm than good to the system, to the state, to the economy. If there has to be something like a proper ecosystem of industrialization, then something like the Gujarat model, that yes, there is a single window solution to every problem that the entrepreneur may have to face, and it has to be resolved in 48 hours. I do hope that the other states replicate the success story of Gujarat.
Well, the fact is that we've all been hoping for some time that for the Gujarat model to be implemented, but I think the problem is the federal nature of India and how the system works. But Gary, there is this area of the conditions in the workplace and the key aspects of internal diligence. At the same time, what should be the best practices that you recommend in improving workplace atmosphere, due diligence checks, at the same time violence and harassment related from the last question, issues that need to be addressed?
I think as Dr. Singh already clearly highlighted, that this has to be come down very heavily whenever reported, so that if once occurred and handled well, there is no chance of anybody thinking that this can be repeated. So our problem has been, we have allowed it to progress in a stepwise manner from minor aberrations to large linking, and as well as leading to any kind of harassment which is not being handled till conclusion. All the corporates are more than happy to hide facts about women's safety, harassment, or men accidents or anything else, rather than handle them well and proudly say that we have stopped it from happening. So I will leave this onus on corporate, because this is something internal in nature. They need to come up with better policies. They need to come up with very strict guidelines, and maybe the way Posh has got a parallel governing body within the company to monitor everything about sexual harassment, why not about other aspects as well? At least let there be more accountability, transparency coming into the corporate culture, rather than ability to hide all that which is bad under the carpet and still show that we are clean.
Perhaps people tend to respond at the level of companies to whatever is putting pressure on them through the news media at that point of time. So they address that issue and they get on to wait for the next fire to build up till they do firefighting with the next fire. But Dr. Singh, sir, terrorism, Naxal violence seems to have dropped a bit. And with that has risen a sense of complacency. Now, is that a good thing? Because in your experience, all kinds of violence by anti-national elements, that can be debilitating, not just in metro India, because they can spill over into metro
Obviously.
India, but they can be in mainland India, where also industries and others are contributing to India's growth story. So how do you, I mean, is the police or the intelligence agency or the media, who is going to spell out the benchmark that you can now go a little easy on your alert with that and focus on other things?
Complacency anywhere is just not acceptable. And complacency in this field at least would be suicidal. And I don't think Naxalism and terrorism are going to end not only in our lifetimes, but in the successive generations too. I think they are here to stay, and we have to live with terrorism and Naxalism. Yes, but is it a lull before a storm? Is it a lucid interval? I, for one, would never imagine that this is something that we can be complacent and rest back upon and rest on our laurels. Never. And you have seen the heavy price that we have paid when we had a false sense of complacency and when we had the ambush and we lost brave and valiant men in that particular ambush. Complacency never. In this lucid interval, I would upgradation of our skills, fieldcraft, tactics, our weaponry and our warfare capabilities also. It is time for dry exercise. It's time for fieldcraft. It is certainly not the time to relax and sit back and relax and write and in nostalgia. The fact
but that is for the security forces, sir.
Yes.
What about the industry? What about the others who are caught up in the zone, which is certainly far from safe? Absolutely.
The industry have option one, yes, to increase the production and take the fullest advantage of the peace and the tranquility that has emerged, but also be prepared for a worst case scenario. In that case, say no to the Naxal leadership when they asked for contributions, because that contribution given for a wrong cause will be suicidal and counterproductive to the industry also that contributes to them.
Right. Gary, this is a question which will need more elaboration, which is that what could be the best practices globally that you'd like to see implemented to make India's success story really something that the world begins to look at as a model. Today, I think the world looks at India's success story still with some element of skepticism. Let me give you an example, that while our automobile industry has moved forward, and to the surprise of many people, we are amongst the top 5 manufacturers of vehicles in the world. At one stage, we were number 1 because there was a lull in the Korean production figures, but we are still in the top 5. But again, if you look at some other areas of industrial manufacturing, we employ vast numbers of people. 25 million people employed in the textile industry give you a GDP contribution of 2%, whereas 9.7 million people employed in the IT industry gives you a 3.6 million people employed in the IT industry gives you a 9.7% growth in the GDP. So how can we make everything much more growth effective?
Sure. So there are a lot of aspects in it. Number one, India will continue to get impacted by the global economy and global risks. We will not be able to survive in isolation. If these global risks will hit us with the continuously blurring lines of business boundaries between countries, we need to learn how do we maximize our returns with the present set of resources we have, whether that's the skill set, the type of skill set we have, or resource, anything, natural, everything included. We need to learn how to maximize our returns with whatever investment we can provide as a country. Now, globally, what's changing the biggest is the economy is going up, but there's a continuous decentralization. If you look at last few years, the power from US has been shifting towards China, even towards Europe more and more. And this decentralization has already triggered a strategy warfare and a policy warfare globally. You look at Trump and the Chinese premier directly putting each other that what changes I will bring in, this can impact you so much. So if we can stay under the radar and handle our alignments well, we have a lot to gain. And we need to ensure in this era what we are known for, the policy shift with every change of government, we stabilize. If we provide a stable country, if we are also a place where you can get better returns, something like this will automatically come towards us like a magnet. So starting from best practices, we need to have best practices for governance to show stability. Moment we come to industry, the best practices are in terms of what we have already discussed. We want less of violence, we want more of enforcement and everything of that nature. And thirdly, which is last but not the least, there is a need for a disciplined workforce as well.
Absolutely.
We cannot continue to be a workforce who want to put 4 hours a day but expect the returns which are being provided in US salaries and Euro salaries.
Yeah, well, on that last word, and that last word of warning, that we need to step on the gas as far as our own abilities and output is concerned, before we can start insisting on getting the dues that Western workers do, or more so Japanese and Eastern workers do. Well, thank you very much for your input, sir. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.